Ole Miss should go all in pursuing Dane Key in this year's transfer portal.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Ole Miss Podcast, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Hello, I'm your host, Steven Willis, a 10-year veteran member of the national media with Yahoo Sports and a former Ole Miss staff member. On today's show, we're talking about the transfer portal, and one of the hottest commodities this season will be Kentucky wide receivers Dane Key and Barion Brown. With Ole Miss's youth at the wide receiver position going into next year, adding a leader like Dane Key makes all the sense in the world. Pairing him with a Barion Brown could transform that room under George McDonald's guidance, giving the Rebels a dynamic edge heading into next season. Stay tuned as we break down all of this on the Locked On Ole Miss podcast. We're free and available on all the podcast apps and on YouTube. Thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen every day, and a special hello to the insiders and everydayers who make this show what it is. Don't forget to find that second listen on the network. Chris Carty at Locked On SEC or Corey Burton at Locked On Vandy offer great perspectives on the SEC, Ole Miss as well. Check them out. You can start the season off with a big return on FanDuel. Now new customers can place a $5 bet and get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win that first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. So the transfer portal opens up on Monday. Monday it happens, and already some players are coming in talking about visits they're going to take. Ole Miss is going to try and supplement the early signing day class that they just got away from, where I think 22 players or something like that signed, and as much as 2 or 3 more might be added to that in the coming days. But with the transfer portal, it's going to be all about supplementing that and finding impact players that can help out the positions. Like the wide receiver room is going to be incredibly young going into next season, to where the elder statesman is likely going to be a junior Caden Lee or a junior Aiden Williams. Those are going to be the leaders in that room. So you might want to bring in some leadership and some talent to that room. And I think Dane Key is the perfect person for that. If you want to look at the overall transfer portal needs, according to me, number 1, wide receiver, number 2, right tackle, number 3, cornerback, number 4, edge rusher, and number 5, kickers. That's kind of the shopping list inside the transfer portal as I see it right now. And when you look at the players that are there, the 2 Kentucky wide receivers, they're way up on the list. And you have Dane Key, who last season at Kentucky, and they were an offensively challenged team, a really offensively challenged team. He was really good, though. 47 catches, 715 yards, and 2 touchdowns on a just completely offensively challenged team. His teammate was Barion Brown. He had 29 catches, 361 yards, and 3 touchdowns as well. Ole Miss in the wide receiver room after the early signing day, adding a Caleb Cunningham, adding a Winston Watkins, adding a Samari Reed, adding a Dylan Alford. Sorry about that. You have a young room that is potentially one of the most explosive that Ole Miss has ever signed in the history of the university. And the reputation among wide receivers is absolutely fantastic. A leader for that room is going to be a big deal. Somebody to stand up and grab everybody else's attention, and Dane Key, I think, can do that. And if you want to look at this for real, if you want to find the next Trey Harris, if the next Trey Harris is what you're looking for, Dane Key provides that talent. Not just the leadership, but he provides a lot of the same things that Trey Harris provided. He can make a contested catch. He has no problem going over the middle. He's extremely athletic. He has excellent hands. He will be Mr. Reliable if he walks in the door. And because of that, you're going to see schools like Nebraska, where his wide receiver coach went to after Kentucky. Whenever Dana Holgorsen got brought in at Nebraska, has brought his wide receiver coach with him. So that's the reason for Nebraska. Georgia's going to be on the list because Georgia's wide receivers this year have been absolutely trash, and they're looking for a transfer portal to inject some life into that unit. South Carolina is going to be there because South Carolina's got all the momentum. They're going to pitch Lenore Sellers the whole 9 yards, and Ole Miss is probably going to be on there. I think Zach Berry put out a list of possible suitors for Dane Key the other day. So this is a situation where I think Ole Miss needs to go in both guns blazing for both players, because whenever you look at preferences, I would probably prefer Dane Key to Barion Brown, but I would love both of them. They complement each other so well. They're such a problematic thing. The skill sets are a little bit different. Barion Brown immediately becomes the kickoff return man the moment he walks onto campus. Now, both of these guys, I think, have NFL futures potentially as well. So you're dealing with transfer and the NFL with them. But if they decide to come back to school, if Ole Miss can give an offer at a certain level to where you kind of second guess what's going on, and you have an Austin Simmons at quarterback, you have an offense that has a chance to be more explosive than it's been in the time at Ole Miss. The most explosive this offense probably was, honestly, was in 2020. That Elijah Moore team was very explosive with this offense. And it's been very, very good since then. I'm not saying it hasn't been, but that was probably the most explosive version of this offense. This offense this year, with Austin Simmons and the young guys that are coming in, have a chance to be super explosive. You just need to find the top end of that room. And if you can do that, you'll be in good shape. Now, another position that I talked about was edge. And there is a visit that is already being set up of a player that is going into the transfer portal. After 4 games, Keanu Coate said he was going into the transfer portal. He can't officially do it until Monday, but he said he was going to do it, and he's been in the process of setting up visits. And Pete Nakos put out that Vanderbilt and Ole Miss were going to be the recipients of the visits. In the 4 games that he played this year, he had 5 tackles, 1 tackle for loss, and a half sack. That half sack was against Georgia, as you can see in this picture over the day. Good player, edge. He has multiple years of eligibility. As far as I can tell, only 1 has been used up, so he'd probably have 3 available, but he would have 1 minimum because any player these days will just go pro as well. So we'll see how it looks. Keanu Coate, he's a guy that fits the role of the edge. Now, remember, Ole Miss is in a different dynamic than they were a year ago in the transfer portal. You're not looking necessarily for a Princely Amon-Mielen like you were last year, because you have Suntarine Perkins, who is going to be that number 1 pass rusher on Ole Miss's roster. You're looking for people that are at his level or below, which shouldn't be as high dollar as finding a Princely Amon-Mielen or a Walter Nolan. I think Jaheim Otis is the leader in the clubhouse right now to come to Ole Miss to fill that Walter Nolan role. At cornerback, Ole Miss needs to find somebody to replace Trey Amos in the transfer portal. And we have a lot of stuff in the transfer portal to where Ole Miss can make waves, essentially. But with the early signing day that they just got through and doing so well on certain positions, it just changes the dynamic. And the way that Lane Kiffin looks at roster building across Ole Miss, to where it's like draft and free agency. And Wednesday was the draft class. Monday starts free agency. And Ole Miss is going to go into that with both guns blazing. There's really no way to get around that. And we'll see exactly how it goes for Ole Miss moving forward. I mean, I'm pretty fired up about it. I think that the transfer portal, of course, could be very good for Ole Miss. But the high school recruiting was so far above and beyond what Ole Miss has had, honestly, since probably the A.J. Brown class was the last time that Ole Miss was in these waters where you have a consensus top 15 class, essentially. They're in a really good spot, and Ole Miss needed to replace 50 players. I mention that number all the time with the players that are leaving. 50 players. Ole Miss is going to get 23 or so of them out of the early signing day class. Ole Miss is probably going to scour JUCOs for diamond in the rough prospects that have a chance to be really good. They're going to hit the transfer portal really, really hard. And if there's any JUCOs, they might go after them in February. But the transfer portal is going to be at least this many players. If you look at Ole Miss needing 50 players to get back to a full roster, you can see how Ole Miss would do. So we'll see exactly how it goes. Anyway, coming up next, with Tyler Lockhart's defection, the safety group featuring Ladarian, Carty, Cortez Thomas, Keon Young, and MJ Preston, they've stepped into the spotlight. They're now the second deepest group behind the star-studded wide receiver unit. How will this position of need shape the future for the Rebels? Stay tuned for the breakdown. You know, I love money as much as the next guy, but I'm not about to crawl through a bed of hot coals or wrestle a bear just to save a few bucks. It has to be easy, no hoops, no hassle. So when Mint Mobile said it was simple to get wireless for just $15 a month with the purchase of a 3-month plan, I said, okay, I got to check that out. Guess what? It really is that easy. The hardest part for me, sitting on hold to break up with my old provider. Switching on to Mint Mobile was smooth, quick, and online. Their website is so user-friendly. Just pick your plan, order your SIM card, or use eSIM and activate in minutes. Here's the deal. All 3-month plans, including unlimited plans, are just $15 a month right now. Every plan comes with high-speed data, plus unlimited talk and text delivered to the nation's largest 5G network. You can even bring your old phone to keep your current numbers along with all of your contacts. No need to start fresh. To get this new customer offer and your 3-month premium wireless plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/lockedoncollege. That's mintmobile.com/lockedoncollege. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/lockedoncollege. Requires a $45 upfront payment. That's the equivalent of $15 a month for 3 months. New customers on a 3-month plan only. Speed slower above 40 gigs on the unlimited plan, and additional tax and fees and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details. All right, so Ole Miss had an early signing day on Wednesday that went really, really well. We talked about the wide receiver unit, and honestly, we talked a little bit about the wide receiver and the linebacker unit as well. So the safeties are what's standing out to me today, and I do want to go over the what to watch. There's several players in this group that have the potential to contribute early in this class that aren't big name players. With Tyler Lockhart's potential departure, safety becomes the number 2 position group for 2024. And what does this class tell us about the transfer portal opening on Monday? That is what we're going to talk about as well. The instant impact players that are going to see the field early, I'm not going to talk about Caleb Cunningham or Winnie Watkins or any of those guys. We are going to just look at players to watch that might be outside of everybody's thought process. The players to watch out of this class is Ladarian Carty, Squirrel Carty, out of Escambia High School in Pensacola, Florida. Really good player. There's a couple of Florida players on this list. He's an athlete. He went to a high school where he was the best athlete on the field, and if you watched him, he was the best wide receiver, the best quarterback, the best running back, the best safety, the best cornerback. Whatever was asked of him, he was the best at doing it. Pete Golding is going to have to evaluate him and put him in the right spot. It might be a slot corner type position, but the athleticism of Ladarian Carty has a chance to really take off. Next up is Keon Young. Keon Young is another player really similar to Ladarian Carty that just did everything that was asked of him. He played for the Lakeland Dreadnoughts, which is one of the best programs in the whole state of Florida, and that's nothing to sneeze at. He's coming into Oxford, Mississippi. I am really curious to see if Keon Young is the answer, the replacement for Trey Washington. Maybe not this season, but in the future. I think Keon Young has free safety written all over him. He reads the game so well. He reacts very quickly. He is somebody that is simply one of the best players that you will see on a high school football field going up against it. An example of that, last Friday night, they played Tampa Bay Tech, which is one of the major programs in the state of Florida. They have a 5-star wide receiver that is committed to Oregon right now, that is ranked above Caleb Cunningham. He is a big-time player that everybody wants. In that game, Keon Young was matched up with him the whole game. In that game, the wide receiver had 2 catches for 6 yards. Keon Young is that dude, and he's somebody to definitely pay attention to. The other one is Cortez Thomas. I think Cortez Thomas deserves his flowers, especially after seeing all of the Tyler Lockhart drama that happened yesterday. Cortez Thomas is from another Mississippi State hotbed that I'm sure that a lot of the same games got played. And Cortez Thomas made it all the way through recruiting and signing with just no drama at all. None. It was just a done deal, and he was over with. And props to Cortez Thomas, props to his family, props to that coaching staff that is obviously a very pro-Mississippi State coaching staff for kind of letting it happen. But Cortez Thomas is where he wants to be. And at safety, he is the strong safety. If you want to look at these three players, I see them projecting as slot corner / Husky or something like that. Free safety, and Cortez Thomas is going to be the strong safety. He'll be in that John Saunders type role for Ole Miss defense. And these are really good football players. All of these guys tremendously can help out Ole Miss if you go by potential and talent. And knowing that, everything will be in good hands for several years to come. Should be pretty interesting to that. Now, if you want to look at the transfer portal off of that, I see safety players, which means, and all of them are young safety players, and you see young linebackers that were brought in and young defensive linemen. I think defense is a candidate for a lot of one and dones that you've seen pretty traditionally over Ole Miss. There's some leadership that you want to be brought in, some guys that are just good dudes that are going to do the right thing and be in the right places. Maybe if they can find another John Saunders, maybe if they can find another Jaden Kennedy, if you can do that, another Isaiah Hamilton, you have a chance to prop up that room. Now, in the transfer portal, you need a one cornerback. I think Ole Miss is saving cornerback for the transfer portal because you get more polished corners at that point. But at safety, I think you need one and dones. I think you need to find another John Saunders. You need to find a Lewis Moore. You need to find a Yam Banks, just something to fit in for a year while these guys develop and get them on the field as true freshmen. Yes, you're going to have mistakes. Yes, you're going to have bust, but these guys have the athletic ability to play a lot of football. And if you can do that, you will be all right. I'm not worried about the safety position, but I do think after seeing the early signing day, Ole Miss is going to focus in the portal on the cornerback position. I do think that Ole Miss needs to find a right tackle with Austin Simmons being a lefty, and you can't assume that Jaden Williams or Diego Pounds can just flip over to the right side. I do think that Ole Miss might need to find a right tackle in the portal. A wide receiver we talked about in the first segment, and the kicking game. The kicking game is a huge deal for Ole Miss in the transfer portal. You know, Caden Davis did a fantastic job. Frazier Messine was really, really good this season. Ole Miss needs to work the transfer portal and bring in somebody that can handle it. Ole Miss found Caden Davis through the portal. Everybody forgot about that when Caden Costa did his PED thing the year before. But Ole Miss in that situation, if they have a good kicking game, if they bring in a couple of these leadership level stars, and I do think maybe that Ole Miss needs to find a running back either in the signing class or in the transfer portal to be a third guy. Now, after last season, I'm going to be a little bit careful with who gets brought in because it looked like they were going to do this. Everything got situated for Ole Miss to look a certain way after the transfer portal. And then Rashad Amos just didn't play. Dominic Thomas played more than anybody else, essentially. Ulysses Bentley didn't play very much. The personnel was weird. Henry Parrish ended up being the guy. And then they played a wide receiver the last two games at running back. So personnel-wise, I'm going to be a little bit careful this year. But with Shakai Mills-Knight, he's a big get. He's a real big get. And if Ole Miss can get another running back either through the portal or an early signing day, they will be in good spots as well. Pretty fired up about what can happen there. Coming up on our final segment, we revisit the weirdest recruiting story of the year. Ole Miss may have lost Lockhart, but this wild tale from early signing day confirmed a period of Rebel dominance, kind of in blood. Don't miss it. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel. That's America's #1 sports book, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. Georgia and Texas, it's on a knife's edge. It's almost a pick 'em for the SEC Championship game. I have a hunch that Georgia is going to roll in this game, a game in Georgia. The Georgia Bulldogs have beat them once. They have talent, and it looked like a little bit of something clicked at the very end of that Georgia game in overtime. So whenever you get a hunch in the middle of the game like that, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you get those bets. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place those live bets on the NFL or college football all in one place. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if that first $5 bet wins. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel. It's an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. So in the last segment of the week, we are going to delve a little bit into the Tyler Lockhart story. The weirdest story of recruiting season, and props to the Egg Bowl for giving it to us. We did not have a weird Egg Bowl this year. I'm glad something weird came out of this rivalry, even on signing day. Listen, as this starts, people need to approach this in different ways. Like Ole Miss fans, every one of them, as soon as Tyler Lockhart looked like he was going to Mississippi State, it was like, okay, on to the next one. Because even though I said that Tyler Lockhart was a freakish player, a great player, going to help whatever team he goes to, including Mississippi State, Ole Miss can get 20 Tyler Lockharts. There's other ones out there. It's not a one or done type situation for Ole Miss. Ole Miss's success has brought that. And that means the fan base can act a little bit differently. Now, they might be a little bit disappointed by weirdness and things like that happen, but the desperation involved in Mississippi State going completely all in to get this player, with rumors of basically blackmail and all of that to make it happen. It was the weirdest story ever. And none of it may be true, but that is what is going around. It just shows the position that Ole Miss football is in right now and Mississippi State's football team is in right now, because it would not need to be so extreme for Mississippi State if they weren't a desperate program, if they were not a 2-10 program, if they were not looking for any sort of positive press that they can get. Again, I think he's going to be a good player at Mississippi State. I think Mississippi State got a good target, and they got him because they had to get him, because there were no other options for a player that good to go to Mississippi State. That is why all of this happened. When you looked at the whole thing before the commitment ceremony, whenever he chose Ole Miss, all the Mississippi State people were saying, if he chooses Ole Miss, we need to get our pitchforks ready. And they were planning to start a mutiny, which let the cards go for like, we're not going to stop chasing this until the very end of the situation. The rumor is he has a brother on the football team. And like I said, it's just a rumor, can't verify it, and nobody would verify this. But the rumor is that there was like, hey, if you like this guy having a scholarship, you've got to be good and you can't go to Ole Miss. So we'll see exactly how it goes and how it works out, but it was shady. And everybody saw the video of him having the commitment ceremony when the Ole Miss shirt and all of that. Everybody saw him doing the land shark thing with upset Mississippi State people beside him. None of this should be a surprise to anybody. In my opinion, this just confirms the period of dominance that Ole Miss is in right now. You know how much Ole Miss has dominated Mississippi State recently? Ole Miss is going for 5 out of 6 wins the next time they play the Egg Bowl. But everybody's going to say, but that game's in Starkville, Steve. Yes, Ole Miss has won 4 out of the last 5 games in Starkville. Ole Miss is dominating the recruitment of everybody in the state of Mississippi. They've signed the #1 player in the state the last 3 years, including Caleb Cunningham, who is about 25 minutes away from Starkville, from the Mississippi State campus. The transfer portal, they're an absolute machine. All of the pub and all of the news is about them. Stories are coming out about how Mississippi State should just give up football because they're poor, essentially. It is the Mississippi State darkest timeline. They had to have this win at all costs. They lost Caleb Cunningham. Everybody was flipping out about that. And because it looked like that Mississippi State quit recruiting him after he committed to Alabama, Tyler Lockhart from a Mississippi State town, with a brother that is on Mississippi State's football team, with a best friend that goes to Mississippi State, Mississippi State was going to fight this into the bitter end. And like I said, he's going to be a good football player at Mississippi State. He's a good football player. He's genuinely a good football player. The difference in this situation and the difference between the two schools is there's many others that Ole Miss can swing to in the transfer portal to find that good football player, while this might have been Mississippi State's only opportunity to get him. That is why this happened. It was completely out of Mississippi State desperation. And he's going to be all right. The kid's going to make it. He's going to play well, and he has a chance to be pretty good. Mississippi State is pretty good at developing linebackers and tacklers in their system over the last couple of years. He's going to be fine. Whether he wants to be there or not, whether his parents want him to be there or not, however it went down, I genuinely don't care. The important thing that people need to realize about this is there are 20 Tyler Lockharts that Ole Miss can jump in on and have a chance of getting in the transfer portal. In Mississippi State, this was a one or done. This was a get him or else. This was a, hey, do you want the program to drop lower than it's been? Because we don't know that there's anything out there that we can do. So we'll see. It was the weirdest story of signing day. I respect it. It goes back to Tommy Kelly back in the 90s, to where Mississippi State basically hid him at a Ramada Inn in Starkville until signing day to avoid him ending up at Ole Miss. There's so many stories like that. Robert Elliott, the running back, to where basically some Mississippi State reporters stood watch in his yard to make sure nobody else came in to ensure that he got to Mississippi State. Make no mistake, these shenanigans are not new to this rivalry. The difference is what it means. Ole Miss hurt because Robert Elliott signed with Mississippi State, because there wasn't necessarily an opportunity to get another Robert Elliott for Ole Miss. Same with the Tommy Kelly. It was a situation where you help your own team and you hurt their team. Right now, they are helping their team. They are not hurting Ole Miss, not even a little bit. These are two teams that are swimming in completely different ponds. And that isn't a shot at Mississippi State. That's just a statement of fact at the moment. So it was a weird story. It was a reminder of Egg Bowl recruiting past, but Ole Miss is in a much better position than they have been in the Ole Miss-Mississippi State rivalry since the 80s, maybe since the 60s. And this year will be a big deal for Ole Miss football. Thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen and go-to source for Ole Miss sports. We pride ourselves on offering the most comprehensive perspectives, which is why we are the #1 Ole Miss podcast. Your support means the world to us. Thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen. Now go check out Locked On SEC Podcast. Host Chris Gordy holds no punches, covering the best conference in all of college football. Find Locked On SEC on YouTube or wherever you listen to those podcasts. And also, exciting news, you can now become a Locked On Ole Miss Insider. It's the best and easiest way to stay updated on all things Ole Miss sports. It is our texting program that sends you notifications on anything relevant without the hassle of message boards filled with trolls. Remember, if you sign up, you have to validate at the end for the subscription to go through and all of that. They're going to ask you to validate it. If you don't, it'll be an incomplete subscription. I've got like 70 incomplete subscriptions right now. Enjoy a 14-day free trial and experience the future of college sports coverage. We're adding new perks as we grow, so do not miss out. The link is down in the description. And for those wanting to watch some more college sports information on YouTube, we're going to send you to Locked On College Sports right now. Hotty toddy, everyone.